Why are you running for District 177?
Well, as a father and a business owner who was raised here, I want my family to grow up involved in this community, much as myself. I see a Valdosta whose legislature writes to solve issues proactively that can actively benefit the life of the constituents. As a developer, I've gone through the processes enough to realize that capital always flows where there's the least resistance. As a business owner, I also understand the impacts of paying unrealized capital gains tax on properties that ultimately just increase rent prices, right? Like the property owners don't want to foot that bill, so they just pass it on to the renter. Um, so that's something that's kind of been driving me towards making this decision. But before attaining my MBA, I focused in banking, finance, and monetary policy. Each arrow of my quiver was carefully crafted to understand capital allocation and its consequences. As a leader of the region, I believe Valdos's representative should be leading proactively with pragmatic approaches.
And so I wanted to ask you what your top three issues were for District 177, and what's one way that you plan to address each of those?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So as far as my first issue, I feel like it's a repetitive issue. It also appears that I may have ways of going about it that can actually attract the single family housing that we need. So yeah, that issue being affordability, right? Um, so I would personally like to see reciprocity agreements with neighboring states that would enable and incentivize single family projects. The second one is infrastructure. So yeah, we always hear the word infrastructure, but no one truly specifies what infrastructure. Well, with infrastructure, I seek to work with LaHood, Goodman, Burchett, any other representatives in the South region um, that we can collectively create some bargaining power or leverage on behalf of South Georgia and its constituents. Um, I want to ensure that restrictions and regulations are conducive to building single family properties. I want to improve the stormwater infrastructure. Um, so that can be seen every time we have a storm, there's flooding. What happens because of the flooding? The sewer systems flood. So we got houses out here in Valdosta who it may not be a yearly thing, but when it does flood and our, for instance, Sugar Creek um, pump stops up, well, then we have people left with raw sewage rising into their house. And that's not necessarily the end of the world until you realize that all of our valuations are based on what? What could be. And so whenever we have these risks that, if your house floods, that's going to be a huge cost. So in order to mitigate that, we need to be working with the local government. So yes, the local government has their side, but then also from the state side, we can get a coalition together who can benefit Lanier County, Brooks County, Lowndes County, and we can just continue building what we've already started. I'm not sure if you've been to Lakeland lately. You drive up 221, it's a brand new road. It's looking good. So things are moving, but we have to incentivize that development. And that, in my opinion, starts with the infrastructure needed to hold all of these things. Um, and lastly, my third issue is voting integrity. So in 2024, the General Assembly, they passed a law that goes into effect this July 1st. Okay. So what this law states is that QR codes are now banned from voting. Um, and so I'm prepared to work on District 177's behalf to ensure reliable results without the overbearing restrictions, right? Voting is a privilege. Um, so it should never be difficult to exercise, but vote security deserves integrity. And so that is a big reason why I'm running in this special election because come July time, if Kemp has to call a special session, I want someone up there who I wouldn't mind entrusting to run my business on my behalf, right? Um, and you know that that is where I stand.
Perfect. My next thing is how do you feel your experience proves that you are able to deliver results as the representative for District 177?
So my experience, as I've already mentioned, as a developer, entrepreneur, business owner, property owner, all the above, it really gives me an insight to answering the questions of why, right? Why can't rents come down? Well, the local municipalities put a floor on those costs, right? They call them property taxes. And so, let's just come up with a random name. Miss Brown might have been in her house since 1965. Well, she paid 35,000 for her house. But last year, the county tax assessor decided to tell her that her house is actually worth 250,000. So in order to stay in her house, she needs to pay on behalf of 250,000, despite she has never taken out any money other than whatever that initial purchase amount was. And so this is an issue that affects our buying power. It affects the amount of money that we have to provide for us and our families. Um, and I'm not necessarily taking a hostile approach. There definitely is room to, find these taxes and develop these revenues, but we need to do it strategically, and we need to be able to use our wisdom, our discernment, in order to enact that. So that kind of goes back to my focus in undergrad, which was monetary policy, it was banking, and it was finance. And a lot of the conversation around these topics are very diluted with misinformation. But one thing that's not diluted is the complaints I see all around not only this city, but this county and this state about rising property taxes.
That's perfect. My last thing is, especially being as the independent candidate, how much easier it may be for you to work with and collaborate with other state leaders to get things pushed through that would benefit District 177.
Yeah, well, all the candidates are, they're well established. They definitely have their connections. But what I am insisting that we do is we actually move with the governing majority on areas that make sense, right? That benefit all of the Georgians. Now there may be issues that come along where, I can't support that, whatever. But that's why I'm an independent. I'm towing a party line. Um, so yeah, you can pull the party. But then would that same party pull the line for you? And ultimately, that's why I chose to run as an independent.
So when it comes to working with and getting things pushed, what's kind of your approach towards that?
So yeah, working with is really just the collaboration aspect. Because I've done business in local counties around the area. I'm very, very in tune with the needs. Whereas the state of Georgia has done a great job on 221, making sure that thing is paved and good for big rig travels and getting supplies to and from Lakeland. So I mean that's a great start. But what we really need to focus on is how we can collaborate with these guys. Everyone wants to talk about working together. Okay, but like what areas and what specific issues do you see potential to work with people who may not agree with you? But if you're on the same page as far as what the facts are, we can offer different approaches. We can offer, maybe this affects too much of our community in a negative light. Well, that is a stance I'm willing to take, saying let's slow it down here. Unfortunately, this is going to have bad impacts for probably 20% of my constituents. And as my role as representative, I want to be up there and trusted with the people's voice so they know that whatever actions I'm taking are calculated and they are sincere.
That's perfect. Last thing is what you want voters to know ahead of voting in that special election on May 12th.
Okay. Voters, District 177. I totally understand that the first two issues that I put out there can't be done in a special session. They need to wait until we have a true congressional session. Um, but what's not being discussed appropriately, in my opinion, is the issue of election integrity. And that's the issue likely needing special action this summer, right? If they don't have something figured out, which it really isn't sounding like, like I hope I'm wrong, but it sounds like they're not. So come around July time, we may be called on a special session. And I just want the voters to know where I stand on election integrity. I personally believe that your voice matters. I believe that we can juggle two things at once, right? We can try to make sure that there isn't mischievous stuff going on, which I don't believe there's a lot of facts that show that that is a 100% issue. But on the same note, we also have to take into account that we do need to regulate um, our sacred voting right.